Okay, welcome everybody. This is the March 6th meeting of the Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee. And I'll take the roll, new and old members. So Kevin Charette.
Here.
Ben D'Antonio.
Present.
Tracy Cameron.
Here.
Betsy Blaisdell.
Here.
Peter Somsich.
Here.
Tom Rooney.
Here.
Herb Lloyd.
Here.
Counselor Kate Cook.
Here.
This is the biggest group we've ever had. The brain power in this room is intimidating. We circulated the minutes. Stephanie, everybody have a chance to read last meeting's minutes? Any changes? Emendations? If not, I'll welcome a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I have some news for you all before Kevin starts. After several years of representing us with the coalition, his term is ending. And Kevin is going to do other things. So
Pursue other opportunities.
right. And I'm pleased to announce that Tom Rooney will take his place.
Not as vice chair of the board, though, right?
Right,
Yeah.
as the member,
Just to be clear.
member representative, but
Great.
we really have to thank Kevin. For first being our representative. And when the coalition learned about his strong background in utility work and running the whole customer service front end of for Eversource, they quickly promoted him and promoted him again. And he was a very effective vice chair of the coalition. Was that the title?
I think so.
Yeah. And at Cliff Guido's right hand when the coalition was in its formative stages, worked very hard and represented us wonderfully. So thank you for your service and a job well done. And thank you for your service to CPCNH, bringing it from its mere cartilage into now a fully formed entity. So,
I'm not going to stay part of this group.
Yes. Well, you're a Portsmouth resident and we got a lot to figure out.
That's right.
So thanks for the job well done. And thank you, Tom, for
Excellent.
being willing to step up. So this will be your last update.
Yeah, I go through the April annual meeting.
Right.
So, yeah.
Oh, you.
Yeah.
Director of projects.
We don't know that, right?
I do.
There are a lot of applicants.
Yes.
So our next item on the agenda was you were just going to update us. What's happening? Yes.
Sure, yeah, so. Stephanie and Counselor Tabor shared the board package from last month, so if you're having trouble sleeping this evening, it's a good thing to go through. But that board does meet every month, and that's a packet that I think we regularly share. We will share with this group, and I think it's for those who want to kind of get into the weeds with what's going on with the coalition. It's a good document to go through to see all the committee dates and et cetera, financials and so forth. So, but I just pulled together a few slides. None of these did I prepare, but these were ones from a few different packages that have come out recently from the coalition. So I just want to go through a few. I thought it's a good refresher for us here on the committee, as well as our new members, just to get further oriented with the coalition and try to answer any questions that you may have with the board packet. If you had a chance to look at it, as well as there's just a few slides here, I'll buzz through. So next slide here. So We'll just jump to the next one. Go through the agenda. And you can, is that click open? Yeah, you can just go right through it. Yeah, just get them up there. So just a reminder, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but just in terms of the mission of the coalition, and I think kind of the takeaway, we've been up and running since just April of 2023. So, we're about 10 months into this. And I think as an organization, we've really started to kind of touch upon most of these items in a decent way. I think the coalition's in a really good place with all of its member communities to help shape the energy future for New Hampshire. We have a seat at the table. We have a lot of horsepower across the entire state now, a lot of advocates. And so, obviously there's a lot of important players in the state, but I think the coalition has a strong seat at the table. Reduce energy costs. When we first went live last year, energy rates were quite high, the highest we've ever seen them coming through the winter time. I think here in Eversource, we are like 20.2 cents. The other utilities in the state, Liberty and Unitil, were even higher. I think Unitil was at 26 cents. So I think there was a lot of focus on the coalition's ability to help kind of reduce, if not stabilize, rates as we go forward. And that's, I think, one of the tenets of the coalition. And I think we've had a good track record in the first 10 months here. And I'll go through a slide on that in a sec. And part of it, though, is just taking advantage of the competitive markets that exist and taking advantage in a way that the utilities are not. By regulation, they really can't. They only go into the market twice a year to set rates. Their hands are kind of tied. And the brokers kind of work with a different model. It's a for-profit operation, and they too often set their rates for a longer period of time. So I think we have some advantages here to support Portsmouth in that case. Obviously, just the ongoing focus on transitioning to carbon neutral. There's a real interest in balancing the interest of our member communities. We have larger towns like a Portsmouth. We have Nashua. I think we're getting pretty close to Concord coming on board. Dover came on board last fall. But then we have a bunch of tiny towns sprinkled across this state. And I think the coalition's doing a nice job of really, there's no kind of power play. The big cities aren't driving the bus with this organization. Everybody has an equal seat at the table. And I've never had a sense that decisions are being made in the best interest of a Nashua, best interest of a Dover, et cetera. The smallest towns, I think, have an equal seat at the table. And educate is an important part of this. The whole energy industry and the utility industry and the markets can be a bit daunting. It's certainly not an area of expertise of mine, but I think the coalition and through all of our energy committees and all these cities and towns sprinkled across the state, I think we're kind of raising the level of understanding of the current markets in New Hampshire, the markets in New England, opportunities for our cities and towns to take advantage, not only on power, but on eventual energy projects, et cetera. And that's kind of the last bullet there too, in terms of demystifying the power sector. So, this was kind of laid out early on when the business plan was put together for the coalition. And I think they're kind of standing the test of time in terms of still being important. Next slide, Steph. Oops, missed one. Oh, there's another one.
Sorry.
Collaboration and teamwork. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have to have that. Okay, next one. So these are the kind of the four pillars of the benefits, up in the left top corner, lower rates. I mentioned, we're a nonprofit. We're not a for-profit operation like the brokers operating largely in Massachusetts with the community power model in Massachusetts and many other states, but we're a nonprofit. And by managing an active portfolio of contracts, we're better positioned to, over time, provide lower rates. And that, there may be a period of time, and we got close to it, I think, this last period, where we may not always be, exactly below all three utilities. Things can happen in the market, and we have to watch out for the financial stability of the coalition. We can't be reckless in terms of setting rates. But I think more times than not, the rates that CPC&H offer will be lower than the utility. Customer choice. I spent my career in the utility business, and I always have felt that community power, it's just another choice for residents. I mean, all of us in Portsmouth, we can stay with Eversource if we want. We can go with a competitive broker, or we can be with the coalition. And thankfully, most of the residents have not opted out. It's been a tiny number of residents in the city that have opted out, but it's another choice. And I think that's a good thing. You can always opt up, opt in, et cetera. And a menu of choices. So we're right now on the basic, which is comparable to the default service for the utilities, but we have 3 other offerings. And I expect as time goes on, we're going to have more offerings, more innovative rate designs, particularly for our larger customers. But eventually, when we get a more sophisticated metering operation here in New Hampshire, we'll be able to offer more time of use rates, et cetera, for residential and small commercial customers as well. We're not there yet. Local control, that's what it's all about. Our net revenues are designed to be driven back into the operation in terms of driven back into reserves, not only for eventual projects, but for rate stability. If there's periods of time where rates spike in the market and we want to tap into the reserves to be able to kind of shave off the peaks and not have the spikes like we had last winter when we shot up to 20 something cents because of what was going on in the world markets, the reserves are there for that. And then finally, on the clean energy side, the real kind of sexy part of this is eventually being able to drive and finance projects in the region and the local area. So, that's what the coalition's all about. And I think by and large, at least on 3 of the 4, we've made nice progress in the first 10 months. So if you have any questions, just, jump in.
Hey, Kevin,
Sure.
a quick question. On the net revenue side, once the target reserve is met, then, and I understand those funds can be used to stabilize rates in the future and such. What other types of activities can those reserve funds be used for? And is there some benefits that come directly back to the municipality? Or,
Yeah. So, and it gets a little wonky, but we have a document that describes there's a reserve policy that describes in some detail that's available on the CPC&H website if you want to kind of get into the weeds. But initially, because we're standing up this operation, there's big bucks flowing through it.
Mhm.
And so for the financial stability of the coalition, our minimum level is to have 60 days of operating expense in reserve. That's the minimum. And the thought was initially when we did the modeling that it could take 3 years for us to get to 60 days. And the target is to get to 120 days of operating expense in reserve for the aggregate, for all the communities that are part of the coalition. And then if we go above 180 days of operating expense in reserve, that then becomes discretionary reserve. And those monies then kind of flow back to the communities. So until we hit, and it's my understanding, and I could be wrong, so it's been a while since I've looked at it, but I think up until 180 days, the reserves stay in with the coalition. The monies are used for both shaving off peaks for rate stability, as well as helping to start financing renewable projects in the communities and in the region, issuing bonds and so forth, but to have the monies to help support that. Once we go over 180 days, then the monies flow back into the communities. At any point in time, Portsmouth, for example, when we do rate design, so right now we have a rate of 8.1 cents. We could have a rate of 8.3 cents and be putting stockpiling money away in reserve specifically for Portsmouth, right? So we have that ability at any point in time. No community has done that yet. But we can alter the kind of the general rate that CPCNH sets every 6 months.
Half a penny.
You could add it and start to stock away money if we wanted to. There hasn't been any discussion around that, but that's a possibility. I don't know if that answered.
Yeah, it does. I guess, and I can look at the policy online, but I was just curious what the mechanics of the flow back of funds into Portsmouth, what does that look like?
Yeah, so and I'll have a little report here that shows how much has flowed back so far. And there's going to be monthly reporting in terms of how much sits in the Portsmouth portion of the reserve.
Yeah.
And then there's mechanics. If we were, for whatever reason, wanted to exit the coalition, there's provisions in terms of how the reserve money gets given back, if you will, to the community, depending on at what point we exit it. There's a lot of provision around how that works. But in a couple of slides, I'll just show you kind of the monies we have in it at this point.
It also gave the coalition a credit rating. You know, it had to have a balance sheet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot the coalition can do is it gets its financial footing stronger in terms of operating in the power markets, where we're paying some fees now, and there's some aspects of how we're procuring power that can get more advantageous for the coalition as we have a stronger kind of financial footing, and the reserves help that as well.
Yes, Kevin, once again, thanks for all the work you did in the past year.
Well, I think this committee did a ton of work.
Yeah, well, you were
Yeah.
in the trenches representing us. I just wanted to underscore kind of what you said about stabilizing rates. That the rates often are affected by world affairs, whether it's an energy crisis worldwide or war or whatever. On the one hand, we can mitigate those spikes in energy costs by having this reserve. But I wanted to also underscore the fact that the more we invest in renewable energy sources that are in this country, the more we have more control over those kind of energy spikes that might happen being affected by foreign countries. So that too gives us a bit of stability. If we do more of that, people don't think of that initially, just say, oh, renewable energy, that's great. Yeah, but that helps to stabilize your own rate too.
Yep, no, I agree. And I'll show you some financials here in a second, and there won't be a test, but you'll see how the dollars are kind of multiplying very quickly here in terms of the size of the entity.
And I wanted to ask something about the net metering with solar.
Mhm.
Are you going to discuss that later somehow? Because one of the things I was thinking of when we're talking about projects is right now there's some dispute about exactly how they're going to regulate the net metering. But let's say tomorrow somebody wants to do a big solar project in Portsmouth. Can they be a member of our coalition, or is that unresolved, that issue right now?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, Peter.
Okay.
The folks that are involved on the regulatory front would certainly know. I don't have a quick answer for that.
That's right.
Yeah. Next slide, Steph. So this is just the growth in a short period of time, and just a reminder. And then for our new members here, Portsmouth was the 19th member when we joined back in earlier in 2022. And there had been about a dozen communities that had really been at this for a period of time, but we were the 19th. And then we leapfrogged up and we were the 11th utility to show my background, 11th community to go live back in May. We as a group here kind of put pedal to the metal and became the 11th group, but 10 went live last April, 2 more in May, and then Dover and a few others in the fall. So we have 16 communities right now that are live with the coalition, about 90,000 customers. This year is another big year. We have, 12 that are going live this month. Right now, they're going through what we did in Portsmouth, where they got the mailers, they had the opportunity to opt out, et cetera. 12 communities And those are the ones in the darker blue in the middle of the slide. Those communities are going live as we speak. And, it kind of is in conjunction with their meter reading cycle. So over the course of March, all those communities will go live, just like we did here in Portsmouth. Kind of the lighter blue are communities that are going live, we expect in June. And we think there's probably going to be some of the red communities at the bottom that are going to jump into that light blue group as well. So I think we're probably going to have another 25 or 30 cities and towns in New Hampshire go live this year. So, a big jump from where we are right now at 16. And then there are the red communities that are in the planning phase. And then there's a whole bunch of them that are starting to have just initial discussions with the coalition, because it starts to become a no-brainer to why wouldn't you participate? Why wouldn't you just offer this to the members of your community? There's no real downside. There's obviously there's the kind of work that a committee has to do to make it happen, working with the town fathers and so forth. But, the PR around this with the lower rates beating the utilities, why not? And at any point in time, if in a particular period of time, it's not economic, residents can still be with the utility. They can go with your Direct Energies and your Constellations of the world, et cetera. So there's really been, I think, a groundswell across the state here in recent months to join. Peter.
Is there a number of communities or customers the coalition needs to operate with? Not that I'm looking for that number, but is there like a break-even point where they have to be above? If we drop below, will it always function?
Yeah. I mean, we're operating successfully right now at 16.
And that's all they really need.
Yeah. I mean, we're revenue's higher than the cost.
Right.
I was a finance major many years ago. I think that it still stands.
Well, I think
Yeah.
some of the startup costs
Yeah,
are being
they're being,
paid off over time.
right, yeah,
And
Yeah.
of course, the more communities that help pay that off, the faster it gets paid off.
yeah,
Yeah, we're going in a direction where it's only gonna get better.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Looking at the sort of the long term.
Yeah. I mean, one of the beauties of it was kind of an unusual thing is that, we had major consulting firms and, technical folks working for us on their dime when we were forming for the better part of a year and a half. With, brilliant folks supporting us, lots of, that were highly compensated on their dime, but with the understanding that they would get paid back over a period of time once we went live. They had confidence in the business model, that it was going to work. It worked in California. And a lot of these folks that we were working with had experience in California. So it was an interesting concept, but I failed to mention that part of our operating expense right now is kind of amortizing that over time. And there's a formula for how communities pay for it depending on when they came on board. So everybody's kind of paying their fair share, if you will, based upon their load.
And one of the vendors gave a $750,000 loan, as I recall.
Yep, yep.
And that was the seed capital.
Yep.
And then there were other startup expenses, but really it was volunteers. It was the volunteer board. People like Kevin and Cliff Below who launched it.
Well, and the communities before us, they were heavily, the 12, kind of the founding groups originally, but we had, big law firm out of DC and consultants that weren't getting paid anything for a few years just to help get this off the ground. So this is the growth here for 2024. So it's growing. And little by little and you don't see a Concord on there. I think they're close. You don't see a Manchester. I think they're getting closer. So, the bigger entities and will be on board. Excellent stuff. Just a quick, in addition to the counselor mentioned, for the first like year and a half, couple of years, that it was more of a working board that was managing the day-to-day along with the consultants that were on board. But we really do now have kind of a crackerjack little team that's been come on. Ryan Calnan, who came to a meeting a couple of meetings ago, he came to us as an executive with the New Hampshire, the Electric Cooperative, and had been with a similar entity in Vermont. Sharp guy, really personable. He's, I think, a good face and he has that real kind of expertise in power supply, and that's kind of what we're about largely. And he's doing a heck of a job. I had the pleasure of being on the search committee for him, and he was, we were really, really pleased to bring him in. And then we have 3 directors that have come on from different areas, administrations, kind of like purchasing, HR, and accounting and so forth. Dina has come on board as our Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs, doing a great job, and she has her hands full. Henry, and many of you know, was on board. He was a consultant that was working for us, and then he was hired as Director of Member Services, and that's the position that goes out almost nightly around this state and pitches community power in rooms like this all around the state, takes questions, helps bring people through the process. And Henry is worth his weight in gold. And then the next one is, this person is going to be worth their weight in gold for what we want to do. And this is the Director of Energy Programs and Projects. So as we really want to start to put some kind of details and meat on the bone in terms of how communities are going to move forward with projects, renewable projects, and grouping as towns and so forth. This person will have that in their wheelhouse, and I understand we'll probably have someone on board within a month. And then also an energy analyst that's going to be doing a lot of the modeling and analytics, working with our power supply contractor, and working with some rate design for our larger commercial and industrial customers that are largely with competitive suppliers right now. And there's no reason the big industrials and large commercial customers can't be with community power. I mean, we can be as sophisticated with our offerings and as any of the big players out there. And I think that'll start happening over the next year or so. And then we have some partner staff. We have a gentleman who's working with Henry, Andrew Hatch, who's from the Resilient Buildings Group. And he's doing a wonderful job working with Henry hand in glove on the outreach to communities. And he's also going to be the point person on key accounts. So as we start wanting to have offerings to our large commercial industrial customers, you can many of them over in Ps, that Andrew is one of the folks that's working with Coalition on that. And we just brought in a communication coordinator from the Resilient Buildings Group, Madeline. And then we've been working with BeFresh, who's our PR firm in the state. And Andrew has been our point person since we went live. So this is kind of the group that's running the show on a day-to-day basis. And it's really changed. Like the board was more of a working board up through the fall. And now with the team coming on board, the board's more what you'd expect the board to be. And the member representatives kind of, providing strategic advice, asking good questions, kind of lending a hand. But we have a good team on board at this point. And I think we should all feel comfortable with the quality of the gang that's kind of running this place on a day-to-day basis.
And I think you can look at more mature community aggregations like the Cape Power Compact, COD, or ones in Northern California. And if you look at their websites, they're offering programs for time of use and battery storage so that people can maximize their rates. They're offering energy efficiency programs. So if there's all that's to come.
Yep. And even the Cape Compact is almost like a big broker model, though. They don't manage a portfolio of supply. They have like 25 towns on the Cape, but they pretty much aggregate their load and then hook up with a Direct Energy or a Constellation for a 6-month period for their rate,
Right. We're more sophisticated.
or a 12-month period. So they're you know, the California model is closer to, yeah, or pretty much exactly where we are here in New Hampshire. Next up, and so these are the players we're working with, and really for Betsy Tracy and her, the Ascend Analytics is we're working with on power supply. They're doing all the analytics and helping us. When are we going to go into the market and hedge and so forth? The risk committee meets, I'm on the risk committee. We meet monthly and take advice from them in terms of whether or not we should be procuring energy in a particular period and what amounts. Calpine Energy Solution is more kind of our call center data management around billing and usage and customer inquiries, and they're really big in California and came highly recommended. I had worked with them a bit back in my working days. And on the left, we have a big law firm, DWGP, out of Washington, that's worked extensively in community power. We have Echo CFO, so I think, Tom, you know
Yeah, he's in Portsmouth.
Yeah, so they're our outsourced kind of accounting and finance folks. And I think I haven't worked closely with them. I think we've been very happy with them as an organization.
Yeah.
River City Bank is our bank, and you probably never heard of River City Bank, but they're based in California, and their expertise is in community power. And so they are licensed to do business in New Hampshire, and they're our bank and our lockbox, et cetera. And then Barry Dunn is our auditing firm. We just hired we're going through our first financial annual audit right now, which will then be made available to all the member communities to make sure, you know, this is all legit. And Barry Dunn is our auditor, and we evaluated a number of firms and went with them. We're very, very pleased. And then I mentioned Resilient Building Groups, more on the communication side, and Be Fresh on the PR side. Okay. This is just the rates that we're on right now. One thing I want to mention, and there was some pressure this period because the rates changed February 1st. Our Granite Basic is 8.1. The market at that time was more in the 9.7, 10.7, where you see Liberty, the co-op and Unitil. Eversource, and all the utilities have this, is they have the ability to do these reconciling adjustments based upon that they over or under collected in a prior period. Usually it's just like tenths of a cent, you know, 0.1, 0.2. Theirs was 1.5 cent reconciling adjustment. So when they went out to bid, you know, the rate that they were prepared to set was more like 9.7. They had a reconciling adjustment that brought their rate down to 8.2. And we're an Eversource, right? And so the community power, to stay below all the utilities in the state, came up with a rate of 8.1. But that was a bit lower than we were expecting to go for this period, because we kind of had a lens into the market and thought, you know, our rate was probably going to be maybe in the 9.3, 9.4 range to beat the utilities. And it turned out we're down lower. So it's, yeah, it put a little pressure on the financials, a little pressure on, you know, how much is going into rate savings versus how much is going into reserve. The headroom wasn't as great, but nevertheless, we stayed below the lowest utility in the state for the third period.
And interestingly, Eversource bought more power than they needed. And a big factor in that was net meter, was energy coming back from solar, residential solar.
Okay. Yeah.
So they got a refund for power they didn't use, basically.
And there's also, I didn't put it up here, but there's a package, there's a monthly variable rate for the larger commercial customers. It changes on a monthly basis, and our rate is substantially below the Eversource in our community here, but I didn't throw that one out. But the 8.1 is for small commercial and residential, about 12,500 customers in Portsmouth in total thereabouts.
Kevin, can I just ask,
Sure.
You mentioned the risk management group that you're involved with. Just to be clarifying how this works. My understanding is that you guys are constantly buying power all the time and not just every 6 months. is that a kind of a strategy of how to aggregate various sources that you know, I mean, that's one of the benefits we have over the utilities, right?
Yeah, so, and it's another document that's on the website, the risk,
Sure. Risks.
risk management policy. It
Yeah.
kind of goes into and it's probably the most detailed policy in terms of.
Yeah, it was
needs
kind
to
of like
get
CD
followed.
laddering or something
Yeah.
like that, you know?
And so we're not buying all of the time.
Mhm.
The, month to month, we'll get recommendations from Ascend Analytics, and in conjunction with, this is a real sweet spot for our CEO in terms of whether it should be going into the market and how much, how hedged should we
Mhm.
be, whether or not we're going to sit back. And the risk committee has been given a lot of training, and gets a lot of advice and then makes decisions. Some months procurements are made, some months they're not.
Mhm. Okay.
So,
Good question.
and a lot of, there's gonna be just a lot of the procurement happens after the utilities set their rate. So the utilities set the rate in
okay.
December.
Yeah.
So there's a big, and my friend here is closer to this than I am. But after the big players now in the state, Unitil, Liberty and Eversource purchase, sometimes the market comes down, and we take advantage of that kind of lull, if you will. So, right after they set the rate in December, we're in the market buying or setting the rate that went into place in February,
Mhm.
and kind of buying a bit lower. And we kind of ladder out over time. We might be hedged out 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, just depends on what the market looks at and what advice we're getting from our vendor. And then shortly we'll bring out internal staff as well. But you heard.
Yeah, on the commercial side, how competitive is Community Power with some of the others that are out there selling?
I don't monitor the competitive market. I know right now our rate is very competitive on the commercial side. The 8.1 is for small commercial. So
Yeah.
for most of the businesses you walk around in town, those are small commercial. But for the more mid-size, it's the GV rate that they call. Our rate right now is very competitive with Eversource. But then the large customers, by and large, we don't offer a large rate right now. Community Power doesn't. There's no reason we can't, and we will, but we haven't gotten that far. But if your big industrials and large commercial customers in Portsmouth, for example, they're probably all with competitive suppliers. But there's no reason that
Like the Lonzas.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's no reason that Community Power can't have a seat at the table and put offerings before, even customers that large.
But that's in the future.
That's in the future,
In the
yeah.
roadmap.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
And the bigger the customer, they often just go straight to wholesales themselves.
yeah, so I was thinking like Lonza's got it, I mean, they must have a huge power contract.
Yeah. Highlander Foods is also a direct wholesale market participant. So like,
Okay.
the bigger the buyer, you just cut the aggregator out.
Okay.
The next up, I know I'm running late here. So this is just kind of the history of the orange is us. And that kind of light blue, the third one down from the left is Eversource. And you can see how we've just tracked, we were at 15 compared to 20, and then we're, I think, at 10.9 compared to 12.6, and now we're 8.1 compared to 8.3. But you see where the market was for the other players, and Eversource was just kind of artificially low, but we still beat it. Beat my old company. No test here, but this is just to give you a feel for what kind of dollars are flowing through here. The revenue in 2023 was $43 million. You have the cost of goods, that's purchasing the power supply. Most of that, and it's all the way over the right side, was really the last rate period of the year where we had some more communities on board. That bold, our net margin was 5.5, and 6.3 million went into financial reserves back in 2023. And you can see down at the bottom is the reserve operating days. We were talking about that. So we finished up the year at 29 days. Our goal is to be at 60 by year 3. I think we'll beat that. And there's been points in times where we were doing better, but I think some of the bringing Dover and some folks on in the fall, plus a few other things put pressure on it. So we finished at 29 days of operating. So next up, sir. This is just a feel for a full year of 2024. And you just, again, if you look over to the left where the arrow is, revenue of 101 million. And then if you drop down, net margin projected at 10.9. Operating reserves just below that at 17.6 million and 73 days of this was set back in like October, November, and for 2024, and it was before we set the rates with what happened with Eversource and their rate and having to beat it. So I think there's been some pressure. There'll be some pressure on these numbers. There will be. But these numbers only reflect the 13 communities that are coming on this month. We have a whole bunch more communities that are coming on. We didn't know when or how many. So the 2024 budget was only established with kind of known communities. So these numbers will change and it'll be explained in our variance analysis on a month-to-month basis. But you can just see how the numbers are growing. We're up to 101, and we'll probably be well north of that with our projections as we get a little bit further out into the year when we know when some other communities are coming online. So it's it's starting to have some decent money. Well,
Not bad for the 1 year.
yeah. So and these are some of the reports that we'll start to see on a monthly basis. Community benefit report. If you look at Portsmouth, we went live in May. Our revenue from our customers is over 6 million, the cost 5 and change. This is through December. Okay. So it's a bit stale. It was at year end, 667,000 going into reserves. And then the rate savings, 1 million, a little over 1 million. So that's just the difference between what we would have paid if we were with Eversource versus Community Power. So the net benefit in year one to Portsmouth was 1.7 million. And the yellow sections at the bottom, this is for, the 16 communities, $9 million in rate savings and about $14 million in total community benefit. Community benefit is the rate savings plus the reserve. Okay. The next.
It'd be amazing to start to see a carbon benefit associated with this too, if we. could
Yeah,
add an
people have
extra
talked
line
about
item.
that. Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
Be good.
seeing what people are choosing above and beyond a
Yeah.
basic offering,
Yeah, and it's not much. Yeah,
not yet.
so unless this is the election report.
Okay.
So like most communities, we have the granted basic as our default. And particularly when we were going live, when rates were so high, it would have been a little tough to not offer the lowest rate to customers, and to green it up. And it's very easy to opt up. But so if you follow up on Portsmouth again, when we went live, we're about 12,500. The reason our current accounts is less is because customers leave, they move out or they move in. And when they move in, they don't just automatically come on Community Power. They go with the default utility. So they go with, in our case, Eversource. And then on a quarterly basis, we get a report from the utility. And we go through the process that we did with us back in April, where we send out the mailers, say, we're going to bring you on to Community Power. If you want to opt out, you can opt out. So there's a process on a quarterly basis that we manage the churn of all the new residents in town. And anybody that, for example, left their competitive supplier and went back to Eversource, or a new customer moving in and they go with Eversource initially. So once a quarter, we get a report from Eversource and we kind of enroll them just like we enrolled everybody in the city, and with the option to move out. So that's why the current number of customers is lower than when we went live back in May.
Why can't that step be removed? And when I lived in California in Ojai, that was town legislation, like you were defaulted into 100% renewable energy product
Yeah.
as a part of Community Power.
Yeah.
it seems like a lot of effort.
Yeah.
For something that could be just set as the default.
Right.
Why is Eversource the default utility? Just curious what determines that?
Well,
Live for your die.
They have to have, the way the law reads is they have to have the option to opt out.
Yeah.
So, so if they were just put into community power, it would go around that regulation that before you're,
Look at how that's any different than if they're being defaulted into Eversource. Why isn't this just a different default?
well, the community power is the one that has the default requirement. So for community power to exist, there has to be a provision for customers to be able to, before they're placed into it, to be able to opt to say, I don't want to be in it.
So they have to be an Eversource first to be considered, so Eversource can be considered the default, is what they're saying.
Yeah, with community power, they can't just automatically, the way the law reads, they can't automatically come into community power. Because then they'd start taking energy from us and then say, wait a second, I don't want to be here, I want to be somewhere else. And so the way it works is that they're enrolled just like when the community power is established, they're informed that unless you opt out within the next 30 days, you're going to be brought into the community power program in your community. I mean, what you said is, I mean, it certainly can be done from an automation standpoint. I think the utilities would kind of complain about it a little bit from an automation even standpoint, but it's just the way the law reads is you have to have, before you bring them into your program, you have to give them the opportunity to opt, say, I don't want to go into your program.
It's an interesting question for us and we wrestle with. Could we make green, one of the green options our default?
And 3 communities have.
And 3 communities have, yeah, Hanover, Exeter.
Plainville and Peterborough.
But we just felt to engender trust and popular support, we'd go in at the lowest rate.
Mhm.
And if you read the legislation, and the history of the legislation, the big win that Clifton Below got was that it was opt out instead of opt in.
Yep.
And that makes it work. But you can see in the legislation, they had to provide all kinds of backdoors. If somebody doesn't want it, they can leave. You have to notify them before so that they can opt out before. And, it's sort of.
So I helped to pass this bill that we're talking about. And I can tell you it was very difficult to even get it passed because the utilities wanted to have full control over everything. And the fact that we got the option that communities could do this with some reservations was just a compromise among various lawmakers. And one of them was that you had to go through the default utility first, but that the default utility, when a town became a community power community, had to give up all its customers to the local community power group. Like you mentioned, or like John just mentioned, the utilities wanted to make it opt in and not opt out. So
Yeah.
they wanted to force people to have to make a choice. And it was a long battle just to get them to reverse that, to say, people are pretty inert. Once you
Yeah.
put them somewhere, they don't move
Default.
much.
Never.
Yeah.
So if you make
Yeah.
people have to take the choice, and this is a complicated thing for people to figure out, that's almost like killing the whole initiative.
Absolutely.
In fact, Eversource had told me in the past when I asked about why don't I have choices, they said, well, people just don't want green energy. It's something a few people want. Most people don't want it. Yeah. And then the second question you were asking about why not make 100% green opt in or our default. I think we were all very hesitant to do that because you were putting people from the default utility into this new community power. But if you make it into 100% green, now all of a sudden you're asking them to pay 10 cents more per kilowatt hour. And we would get a lot of people immediately opting out back to the utility.
Yeah.
And I think the thinking was, let's opt them in to show them that we can save money for them first.
Yeah.
And that's why we're beating the utility rate. And then the next step would be to say, hey, you're in a community that wants more renewable energy, wants more green energy. You can do your part voluntarily. to opt up. You don't have to go opt up 10 cents, maybe just up 2 cents, then you're at 50% maybe, or whatever. And we felt that politically and psychologically, that was a better way to go, especially in New Hampshire.
I think Betsy's
Counselor-
question too was just though, was really yours.
It's more like. an
Anybody moves into the
administrative
town, you
piece,
move into
yeah.
the town this month,
Yeah,
you know, Betsy should just come on to
Yeah.
community
Yeah,
power. And it just, the rule doesn't work that way. You kind of have to go to the utility first and then we have to inform you. There has to be a communication process. Just like, because we offered that communication to everybody else in the city and town when we were formed.
Before we switch.
So we have to offer that same right, if you will, to opt to say, no, I don't want to go with community power. And it works the same way in Massachusetts. And ultimately, I think we're going to be doing it on a monthly basis. The utility, it becomes a more oiled process.
Yeah.
But right now, the CPCNH has decided only to do it on a quarterly basis because there's an expense associated with issuing the mailers
of course. Yeah.
and administering this thing. So they've said, because the numbers aren't huge, initially we're doing it on a quarterly basis, but I think once we're up and running, it'll be kind of just, we might not issue as the material might not be as, you know, involved.
I
and so
want to
forth.
get
Yeah.
Counselor Cook's.
I just have a question about, I'm sure someone's doing this at the coalition, but I wanted to ask you, is someone tracking the number of communities that are members and number of state reps as a result and senators that would be on board with community power so that we know at what point we can introduce fixes to the law and absolutely have them pass?
Not sure I felt the beginning. Are we tracking?
The number of state reps we have and state senators that are members of communities that are part of state.
Yeah,
that
I
we
don't
can-
know. I know our,
fix this.
we have a regulatory and legislative committee. Bill Baber from I think he's in Dover, was a state rep, or I don't know if he still is or not. And the Clifton and others, they know, you know, the players that we
Keeping it.
have, that are part of community power and so forth.
I'm just hoping that we hit a point, like, we know we have a critical mass at one point, that it would be really easy to fix some issues like this so that we're
Yeah.
not expending money on trying to enroll people that they're, you know,
Yeah.
automatically enrolled. in.
Yeah.
So
I think that to the point is, it's just like, we have to afford everybody the same opportunity to opt out.
Mm.
Right? Because we gave you the opportunity to opt out, right, when
Mm.
we went live. And so, you know, Joe Smith moves to town, we can't just say, you're in community power. We have to afford Joe Smith the same opportunity to say, I'm not interested, you know?
But
So
maybe we
that's
can,
kind of where, yeah.
we can fix that down the line where they're automatically enrolled in community power, but they also get a leaflet saying you're automatically part of community power. You have these other options.
Yeah.
If you want, you know,
Yeah.
rather than
Yeah,
vice
doing it,
versa.
coming at the other direction, yeah.
Counselor Cook, I would just
I'm
say,
going to move us along.
Yeah, yeah.
I would
sure.
just say that the law itself, to try to change that is a bigger effort. We have so much flexibility right now as a community power municipality. Like, for example, opting people up to 100% green. The bill doesn't stop us from doing that. That's a better goal than to try to get those people up
No,
there
I-
to change, to modify anything in the bill.
I don't know, I'm not saying anything until
Yeah,
we know we have a critical mass that it absolutely
Yeah,
passed.
yeah.
That's all.
And the thing is, people don't opt out, so they come in anyway. It's just, there's some.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy to get them there. And so the final thing, and I think this is, in year one, is one of the big benefits, if you will. You know, we talk about rates a lot, but speaking with a common voice in Concord, it's, I think, just hugely beneficial. We have a very strong regulatory and legislative committee. We now have a director of regulatory affairs. We have Clifton, our CEO, et cetera. Samuel Golding, who many of you recall, is now still with us full time, working just on legislative and regulatory matters. And in the board packet, there was a section there. There's probably 20 kind of bills right now that are being monitored or supported or opposed. And for the interest of our communities, there's another probably half a dozen big things going on at the PUC, a lot around net metering that very active. And so this is all new. And to have this entity have the seat on regulatory and legislative affairs to help drive energy policy in the state is just hugely beneficial. You know, and it doesn't happen overnight, but just knowing that there's people in Concord all the time working on these things on our behalf, I
Hmm.
think is really good.
Can I ask one last question about systems benefit charge? So I'm not, unfortunately not on community power because I'm a net metering customer. I have solar in my house,
Yeah.
but how does that work with community power and how the utilities distribute the programs that the systems benefit charge pays for? So I'm just wondering, how do communities that participate in this get to leverage, or do they not get to leverage? Because there's no system benefit.
in the
charge.
distribution rate.
It's on the distribution rate.
Yeah.
It's non-bypassable
No impact.
surcharge.
It's not a,
It's
we're
on the
just,
distribution rate, so therefore,
Non-bypassable surcharge on the distribution rate, and all of it goes to efficiency.
Okay.
There's no impact.
so for residents, they still get to access all the New Hampshire Saves
Yes.
program.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
That's the equity in it.
got it.
Yeah.
we only deal with the supply part of it.
Yeah. Okay, so that comes through the distribution portion that we get on our.
Yeah.
Yeah.
bills.
And
Okay.
low income.
And that's also
customers are
Reggie,
participating.
regional greenhouse gas initiative is also, I think, part of the systems benefit. The New Hampshire Saves, the Reggie, right?
It all comes back. That doesn't go into efficiency.
Oh, it does not, but it's in that fee, or isn't
So it's so crazy. We
it?
collect it and then they give it back.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So back to who?
Us, so.
Ratepayers.
Yeah,
Sorry,
allegedly,
Counselor. I left it
allegedly,
alone. So,
No, that's
Yeah.
fine. I think it gave good in-depth.
because we don't know where that.
but this is the area that I think is just the sweet spot right now with having influence. And there's just a lot of discussion around the different pieces of legislation, and they've had good success in shutting down some things that didn't make sense. And really putting an arm behind things that were important and so forth, yeah.
Historically, no offense, Ben, but utilities have had strong lobbying presence in
Mhm.
Concord. As you know, when you were in the legislature. So this is a big counterweight.
And I think the competitive suppliers over time have had a voice as well to a degree, the big ones.
And
But-
a lot of things only happen because of broad coalitions, you know. This bill only happened that way.
Hmm.
Some of the brokers were at the table helping craft this
Yeah.
along with the coalition, even though they're competing suppliers, so.
I just kind of want to raise a voice in defense of the utilities. Just because when you think of the fact, when you.
For the record,
Yeah,
none of the utilities make a dime.
well, this is, just,
Why?
Ben, that's exactly what
It's
I'm trying to
fact.
tell you. Say, unfortunately, the utilities, as Ben would affirm, is the supply part of it. They're not allowed to make profit on that. They're supposed to get the cheapest possible power, whatever they get. Whether it's 99% fossil fuel, they're mandated to get the cheapest, lowest cost. And they have to pass it on to you at the very same price. They're not making profit on it. The only place they're making profit on is a part of the distribution network, whether it's the transmission or other things. In fact, when they build things, they can recover their costs plus 7-8%, whatever it is. That's how they can make money. So that kind of model is not a good model. If that's all you can make money from, and you can't make money on other things. So it seems to me, because we've taken the supply out of the bill, and they used to make money on that in the past. Now we're making the utilities more vulnerable to them being financially stable unless they come up with a different business model. For example, going all out with providing anybody that wants any kind of energy devices, whether it's a heat pump or whatever, like the Green Mountain Power in Vermont is doing. It's becoming like the energy hub for everything. And they make money on all those things too, but not our utilities because they're not allowed to do that. So they are in a precarious position financially and future-wise, but we need them. Okay.
Yeah, they're absolutely essential partners for this whole thing. Thank you for that. And I think for new members, that's a great overview from somebody who was there at the creation. So, I just wanted to, we asked Kevin and Ben to look into, I think Cliff had asked Look at that data capability. Or just briefly update us on.
Sure. So after our last meeting in February, Kevin and I met with Cliff Belo on February 13th to discuss a project that's been in the works for about 2 years now. There is this proposal to build what they're calling a energy data hub, where the utilities would provide usage data for other customers into a, combined warehouse. And then once it's there, then it could be used for various purposes. And there just so happens to be a federal funding opportunity under the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships Program. And I'm working on those efforts in my day job. So I stuck my hand up and said, I'll look into this. So we met with Cliff Belo, and it's a multi-state proposal for federal funding. We got New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. Unitil is the lead utility, but there are, I think, probably a dozen different utilities that are involved in this proposal. The total proposal is $29 million to build this data hub that would be, multi-state, quasi-regional. The opportunity that they're pursuing, it's a matching grant opportunity. So in theory, if they're successful, they'll be able to receive up to 50% of the project cost from the feds under the Infrastructure and Investment Act of 2021. And the way that it fits in for us is that it's a data hub. What are the potential uses for a data hub? You want to save customers money. You want to enable them to do other innovative things that they want to do with their energy usage, allow them to reduce their greenhouse gas footprint, et cetera. And having that information, I think, is like the foundational requirement to enable all of these other good things. So Portsmouth is one of the communities that has a portion of it that is recognized by the federal government as being disadvantaged. And part of this funding opportunity is that if you can demonstrate that you're going to provide benefits to disadvantaged communities, then you have a solid chance of getting this money. So since Portsmouth is involved, they said, hey, Kevin, you're in Portsmouth. Why don't you guys see what you can do? And what we could do that's actionable in the very, very short timeline, because the application is due in mid-May, even though this has been going for about 2 years. They submitted a concept paper in January, interesting concept. But right now they're developing the full application, and, I'll bore you with the details of that. But in essence, if the city of Portsmouth, perhaps under a recommendation from us, were able to say, here's this initiative that the city really likes, but we just don't have customer data to be able to do it. And if we were able to get the customer data that could be enabled by this platform, then we could proceed with implementing this initiative that the city really likes. I'm not aware of any initiative that would fit the bill at this very moment in time. And we've only got weeks to be able to get it into the application. So I'm not sure that there's a real, strong way that we can directly contribute to this application and the process. But that said, it's we've looked at it, and I've relayed my findings to our chair, our president here, whatever, chair, and not quite sure we have any specific measures that we could speak about in an articulate way in this application. So for now, I think we're offering moral support, and really appreciate that everybody's trying to find opportunities to save money and to increase opportunities for customers.
Would you like
Please.
an idea, maybe? Is it too late to?
And what kind of data are we talking about?
Customer usage,
Just-
your net metering problem would be solved.
Okay, so that's a
So it's gonna take.
It's gonna take years.
idea.
It's gonna take years.
Portsmouth Housing Authority is benchmarking their buildings, but they can't get the whole building because they can't get access to all of their tenants' utility bills. So in other states, you can get that in aggregate, and then you can benchmark and you can do other things. Would be nice if we could help with that.
Do we have anything written and well-developed around that initiative?
Well, so they have a report that they wrote for all the benchmarking. Last summer, they benchmarked all their buildings short of the tenant electrical use, so that could be used. I can't remember if they got into that lack of data, but they may have. I can look.
And then what would they do with that information if they had it?
Well, so they can look across the portfolio and see what's the super inefficient developments, what are the efficient ones, so they can target. It would mostly be targeting and then tracking savings.
Benchmark.
That sounds concrete enough to me.
Why,
yeah.
so why, isn't it by building? They can't get the
It
data
is
by building?
But like, yeah, some of the buildings, they may be master metered, but most of them, they're not master metered, they're individually metered,
so
and they
it's
don't
all
have
the
access
meters.
to those meters. Unless you go around and try to get them individually, but it's pretty challenging to do that.
Yeah.
So Ben,
That's the exact kind of thing we're looking for. And if you can get me some information, I can convert that into some
And
language.
there may
We'll
be
send it
just
off.
other communities that have that same, I can imagine like a Nashua or something has
We- we
perhaps a
certainly-
similar.
We certainly struggled with getting that resolution of data in the greenhouse gas inventory. They would just give us bulk data, commercial, industrial, residential. And we couldn't get any tighter resolution than that, and that was a fight to get to that. And it took a long time. So having the data, if people want more updates on greenhouse gas inventories, that's the longest part of the process, is getting the data from
Mm,
utilities. And
yeah.
the gas company, I don't even think they gave it to us the most recent time, but sometimes they're hard too.
Are you
It's not
converting
just-
usage into, greenhouse gases or
Mhm.
something? 'Cause
Yeah.
that's what we
Yeah.
get as usage.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what our inventory does.
That's another good use. You got,
Ben, just to clarify, we had a bill in the legislature that talked about an energy hub. And when we talked about it with that bill, which didn't pass incidentally, the idea was to be able to come together, all the data aggregated anonymously, basically on consumption, on all energy sources. So not just electricity,
Right.
but heating, transportation, all of that together in one place, so that vendors who are offering energy efficiency services in any of those sectors could say, okay, we know that, let's say this community has this big a demand for heating or transportation, whatever. We're offering you some kind of a plan, and you can either sign up or not sign up on it. It's not individualized. And is this energy hub restricted just to electricity
Don't think so.
use or all energy usage?
But I think gas was included.
I agree. I think it's electric and gas. Than what the
Heating oil?
utilities can provide.
Heating oil? I mean, most people heat with oil.
That's not hard.
Yeah. Well, that was part of this bill, that those kind of that kind of data is what
Yeah,
it,
that'd be really bad.
I mean, it's a,
That's what-
it's a big chunk of
It's
our
been
energy.
going on for like 2 years in New Hampshire. And they weren't, the grant size wasn't gonna be large enough if it was just gonna be New Hampshire. That's why they were.
So to
out.
move
I didn't get that.
to move to action on this, Tom, you could get a couple of
Yeah,
paragraphs to
yeah,
Ben
that
on,
sounds really good.
on,
Housing Authority.
DHA.
Primary source material is helpful.
If you guys need to get together with anybody from the Housing Authority, do that.
Okay.
But
And if there's anything around the inventory that,
It would be, reporting how, I mean, I don't want to really bash the utilities in a way, because
it's okay, everyone's doing it.
everyone's doing it.
they're used to.
It would be like, I don't have probably a good record of how many times we asked, but I had an intern that every week since he started, he'd ask and he wouldn't get anything until the very end, his time was up and they got the data to us. And then the data they gave us,
What would you
was-
do with that information?
so you tie it to the kilowatt hours by each sector. And then tie it into the grid and then, do your math on how much greenhouse gas emissions is by each sector in the community. So the community inventory is much better if you have that resolution in it.
And
Other-
that's essential for understanding how the town can meet its targets in the climate action
exactly.
plan.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
and combining the both of those pieces.
Yeah.
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 That we need to articulate that.
Feed that data into sign map.
That's what it is. That's what,
Okay, so.
or any platform, yeah.
Yeah, but that's what you're talking, because the city has sign map, right? You have a subscription. to that.
UNH, yep.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
with sign up, we've used ICLEI. You can use a
Okay.
spreadsheet program. There's lots of ways to do it, but
Okay.
it's the fact that the data going into it has to be, the better the data going into it, the better it is. And the natural gas was challenging, but we usually get it. The heating oil, we didn't have a good mechanism to get it. We use census data averages, which don't change enough to really be useful.
Mhm.
And propane is another one that's just really
Propane, yeah.
challenging to get.
Yeah.
So, you can follow up with Ben?
Yeah.
Or maybe your latest intern can follow up with Ben?
Not my latest intern, but I was thinking, I was saying to Kevin that Jackson Calsperi at Dover would be a great resource on this, because he did his PhD on this area.
Or Dover's one of the communities. that-
They have in Dover, they have a disadvantage they must have.
And what would really make it really persuasive is if it's something that the city has espoused publicly in writing. If
Some
there's
kind of
a
goal or something.
Well,
Plan-
don't just zhuzh it,
a
or you
plan or
can send your
whatever.
Piece and I can zhuzh it.
Well, we have a climate action plan
It's
that's
not-
due to
it's
be
like documenting.
adopted in a month.
That's
I
exactly
mean,
the
it's
kind
gonna
of thing
be
we need.
adopted
right.
next month, right? Is
What?
the estimate on the climate action plan next month, or it's coming within a month or so?
The climate action plan, but the problem is that in the greenhouse gas inventories we've done in the past, we don't go into great detail about how difficult it was to get that data from the utility. We can talk about why it's useful from that data.
But if there's a climate action plan or some kind of resolution or something official that the city has espoused with its
Yeah.
legal authority that says that we want to do this,
Mhm.
but we need better information to accomplish
Oh,
it.
yeah.
That's the exact kind of thing that we
And-
can plop in there.
And an
say,
example
"Look
from the
what
housing
we're doing."
authority too.
Yeah,
That would
yeah.
The housing authority is really persuasive
great.
because they are the disadvantaged community.
Peter, does the city have to report like scope 1 and scope 2? The SEC today ruled that corporations have to report scope 1 and scope 2.
Are we required?
Is that,
to do
yeah, is that a requirement
no.
or coming?
Or-
No.
But that's in the report, but that,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I'm wondering,
But if we want to do it and we want to achieve the goal of the, of the city by
Yeah.
getting the, and to get our targets.
Well, it's no reason not to do it voluntarily. I mean,
well, I'm just,
just because it's not required.
Counselor, if we wanted to have the council vote to seek this federal money to get an energy data hub in order to get a better baseline for greenhouse gases in our climate action, that sounds like.
We could draft something that would fit kind of the timing of the climate action plan and to sort of
Mhm.
speak to the goal of the grant that could get before the council. So you get the language that you're looking for and the council sort of support from the community, for the community.
Plus you have the formal city council eco municipality declaration, which is 2017.
After some preliminary data from the housing authority to show, here's what's possible, and we still have some things missing. And we'd like to have support for that. I think that would show that it's concrete. It's not just aspiration.
For sure. A concrete nexus is great, but what really brings it over the top is, and therefore we would do this with
That's
it.
right. That's
And the
right.
effect of that
What do we
can be
do?
measured
Mhm.
on a disadvantaged community, and then the Fed say, great.
Are you looking for only the specific communities that are gonna get the funding? Because we're part of a network of communities and this topic comes up all the time. It's like those darn utilities won't give us the data, and so if a bunch of other communities saying it would help.
Hmm.
That.
Agreed. Time is short and we need to make sure that we are legally authorized to make the statements that we want to make.
Mhm.
Yeah, CPC&H right now is reaching out to the communities that are members that have disadvantaged
Yep.
definitions.
Listed.
But the expectation is though that the benefit to CPC&H will be across the board to all communities.
Council be a subrecipient, right?
So who's coming up with the additional matching funds? Is it the utilities that are applying or coming up with the
Match.
match
Utilities.
internally?
Yeah,
Half
all
it's
of us
utilities.
and our rates.
That's what I'm,
There goes the assistance.
$15 million over 3 states.
great.
But
Good.
that money's going towards it, from the utilities automatic. And then the Fed's giving the rest.
If the application is successful, half in theory, or maybe somewhere up to half would come from the feds. The other half would be your normal rate cases. We're going to propose to the state PUC that we invest X dollars in this project. It's part of a multi-state project, et cetera. PUC agrees or not,
And I understand that half of the government grant, half of it would go to the utilities to write down their investment in the IT. And the other half would go toward the community benefit programs. They would kind of dole it out to help support the implementation of the community benefit, whatever that means.
Folks like Clean Energy New Hampshire going around and making sure that people are aware that this new thing exists in your communities now has more information that you can effectuate your objectives with.
So, if I could ask, I understand the problem that the city has had getting the data. The data's there. The city just has, there's issues with actually getting access to the data. So what we're saying under this new data warehouse is the city, somebody like Peter or somebody from his staff is gonna be given access to this data, so we won't be in the same situation once this data warehouse is up and running.
At the macro level, yes, I think there's a couple of steps in between, but generally speaking, that's the objective, to make the information available, certainly to municipal officials and public, interested folks, but also to potentially, for-profit third parties that want to come in and provide services that are consistent with the town.
And to make it available in a very consistent way across Connecticut, Mass, and New Hampshire.
Yep.
So
it's not,
I'm thinking, Peter, you and I can meet and look at some language, and Ben, we might need to run it. It's you.
Yeah, no problem.
But some language for something to put before the council to get that great support.
I think this one's due in May, so we can,
Chop, chop.
yep.
Okay. Good. Peter and I will meet sooner rather than later. Seacoast Green Power Challenge. The city manager had an email. Durham, Dover, Rye. And maybe some other seacoast towns are saying, why don't we challenge each other to see how much Green 100 and Green 50 we can get in our various communities. So it's and was it Todd Selig in Durham that wrote us? Yeah.
Oh, I don't know who wrote us, but he's the.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I put that before you. It sounded to me like a good idea to have a little friendly competition. We can count folks who opt up in our reduction of carbon footprint, right? So it helps us on our climate action plan. It clearly is something we all want to do. So we can
John, is this just for competition for 100% clean? Or
Okay.
upping up?
it's amorphous at this point.
Oh, because, I mean, I think I like the idea of the challenge. I just think, financially, it's a bigger difference between the current rate that people are paying at the lowest threat and the highest. And maybe people are willing to do half that much and 50%.
Right.
So I'd say maybe one should be flexible with that and say anybody that opts up to at least something higher.
I
No.
would say there's from an education standpoint,
Yeah.
just people understanding, most people I talk to about community power, they say something like, when is that gonna start?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And if you tell them, why don't you make it more expensive for yourself?
Yeah, so you don't wanna tell them it's gonna be super expensive, but all you gotta do is spend, the 0.2 or 2 cents or whatever, a little bit more.
Well, and a challenge like that, everybody has to give something and do something. And if you're only able to pay 2 cents more every kilowatt hour, go do that, but it's not free. Everyone does have to make some kind of a commitment. But if you make it at the highest level, then many people who might feel really pinched with that would say, I can't do 100% green.
So at this point, I think we were just asked, does Portsmouth want to participate?
I think we should
But I
shame
bring that
people
to
into
us
doing it. Yeah.
and so we can put that to a vote,
Yeah.
maybe if somebody has a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept your,
Join that challenge.
Seacoast
join the challenge, yeah.
Green Energy Power, Green Power Challenge. Yeah,
Yeah. Second.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bill
Okay.
Portsmouth, beat Dover.
Beat the green wave.
Who are the judges?
It's all statistics. And next on our agenda was community solar. And to frame this a little bit, some of us were in an energy conference in the fall, and we heard about other states that make community solar a default in their local aggregations, their community power, and give their customers a 10% discount. And I thought that sounded pretty good. And so Kate Homey and I got on a phone call with, it's in your packet in the
Glenn Weinberg.
Hmm?
Glenn Weinberg.
Yeah, Glenn Weinberg from Jewel Assets. And we learned that those guys are many years ahead of us. But Jewel Assets runs aggregations for a number of small towns. They were able to contract for some community solar and extend that. They were participating in some small, like 5 megawatt, 8 megawatt solar farms and pass that benefit on to their customers. And in fact, the customers do get a 10% discount. The limitations, though, were that there's a very limited supply of solar fields where the developers can allow you to participate. So they're only able to do 3,500 customers in all of New York State.
Hmm.
And as more solar developers come online, the capacity becomes available to do that.
So John, could you just back up a little bit? Because I'm not quite clear how that's supposed to work in general. Is who builds something, who pays for that build? And how do other people benefit from it? I don't quite understand. I mean, I have an idea, but I'm not sure I know how it works.
Right. It took us a while to learn too, and I'm gonna call up my notes just so.
Okay.
Typically, a developer will build it and they sell two products from it. They sell the power to power off takers, which are communities, and then they can, depending on state solar legislation, community solar legislation, they might be able to sell the
Option the
environmental
RECs.
attribute. Yep, the RECs associated with it. The developer usually has some equity in it, and then they also try to get tax equity, usually from corporations. So for example, I help corporations buy tax equity in these deals right now. They're very competitive. Companies want them. Much more fun to pay for a community solar project than to pay the IRS. You have large tax liabilities. And now
This is
in the
federal tax.
federal tax,
Mhm.
and now there's a provision where you can get your tax equity piece like almost instantaneously. So there's a lot of tax equity happening as a part of these deals. So anyways, Maine's actually been quite successful with community solar. They've got great enabling state legislation to support that. We have property in Maine too, and our off-takers of community solar in Maine. But New Hampshire, it's quite limited, I thought. So I thought that I don't know
Well,
what the
we were,
latest is, but
and I think that's one of the questions we have to answer is what's the enabling legislation in New
Yeah.
Hampshire versus Maine or New York?
yeah, I think it's a small amount that's allowable. And then I think it's specific for a specific purpose. If I read, I've got to remind myself on the Desiree website, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's a problem. But if New Hampshire has legislation that allows for these projects to happen and that both the products can be sold, it makes community solar quite financially attractive. And it's cool because you get to have multiple community participants. You can have corporations support it, and then the off takers get a discounted rate. Yeah.
Right.
I was just gonna add that we've had a number of these community solar companies with, they call them solar gardens, that say, we'll give you basically a discount on your energy if you agree to let us assign the power to the municipality.
Right.
And then we're not gonna give you the RECs, so you can't say it's renewable, but you'll
Yep.
be assigned solar energy. They
Yep.
now sell the RECs.
Yeah.
That's where
And
revision
then-
came in and presented.
They
that.
said,
Yeah.
and then they said we'd have to lock in for like 20 years or maybe shorter, like 10. But our concern is that, well, one, we're not getting the credit for the renewable energy, but two, if the benefit from community power comes in and we want to build solar and take that, et cetera, I don't know, it seemed like that would be,
Right,
Like a
that's it's sort of, Revision came and talked to us about that and that's municipal participation.
different.
Um, The Revision has, they're building 8 solar farms. They're the developer. And they've got 16 megawatts. So we as a city would allocate a portion of our load as a participant. And Eversource would give the city the rebate, process the rebate.
So would
And-
that be like a credit, like the net metering credit that people get? Is that the way it
Right.
would work?
Right. You know, it would reduce our city municipal carbon footprint. We get the rebate,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a long-term contract, 20 years. And that locks up a portion of the city's load.
But they said we'd get the green credit. We wouldn't lose the renewable credit.
It's
I
very
think-
rare you get the credit with, you don't, it's very rare you get both. Like in New York, you don't,
Mhm.
for example.
Well, we have to double check that.
Yeah.
I think,
I seem to think they said that the solar arrays that we have currently at the high school would count against us as well, like
Right.
as far as
Yeah.
the amount that we could,
right. Right.
Would count against what?
our total, we're limited to, aren't we limited?
Oh,
to
we're
five-
limited to a certain,
Yes,
5 megawatts, so.
and that would count again, against that.
right. So there's that. I don't know what we call that, except for what revision showed us. And then there's around the country, community solar like you've seen in Maine. And this is how it works in New York. There's a solar farm. It sends energy to the utility grid, resulting in solar credits. The utility applies the solar credits to subscriber electric bills. And the subscribers save money each month on every electric bill. But we've got to know what the enabling legislation is in New Hampshire. This was an example in New York.
Mhm.
And the other thing we have to find out is whether there's any solar available, you know, because that's all getting scooped up pretty fast. And in New York, in these community power aggregations, the customer, they can either get a full discount with no RECs, or they can get a 75% savings and get the RECs.
This was in New York?
Yeah.
Interesting, because the RECs are so valuable in New York, like. They have the most valuable market for RECs, so I thought like, in effect, in order to save money
Mhm.
for subscribers, the RECs basically had to be sold, so that's cool.
Right.
Yeah, New Hampshire has probably the lowest value for solar RECs
Yeah,
in the
what do you
country.
get, what do you get each month or each quarter? Like $7. Solar.
Yeah, it's very low. But the thing is, I'm saying if I sold it in New Hampshire, I get low.
Yeah.
But my RECs are being sold in Connecticut
Oh,
by my broker.
okay.
So if you have solar RECs that you're generating, you don't want to sell them in the New Hampshire market at all.
Yeah.
You want to get someone that puts it in an auction in Rhode Island or in Connecticut,
Yeah.
so they pay more.
More valuable markets, yeah, yeah.
I, you know, when we talked to Glenn, he was saying each solar farm about average 5, between 3 and 8 supports maybe 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
So Portsmouth would need 10 5-megawatt solar farms at least.
Yeah,
And that's,
I can pull up the legislation and like do some research for the next meeting, but it's extremely limited is what I remember reading, the size for these projects.
right. And then, Glenn said, well, another option is to get the full environmental and other benefits if your city partners with a solar developer and some land. And I think that is the thing that has potential to explore.
It's easier to explain.
Yes, you're telling me. Uh,
So, John,
and then we can require the solar developer to give all the recs to the city. We can look at all the benefits that we could get out of that. And we've got some parcels of land that, are unbuildable or wet, low value that, that's me talking.
Yeah. no, We have a lot of parking lots too.
We have a lot of parking.
that's right.
So, and I think now, as of 2019 or 20, they've upped the limit to 5 megawatts. Is what we can do in the project. So,
John, I could look into what the difference is between the enabling legislation in New Hampshire versus Maine.
Awesome.
See if there's some difference there. And that would be something worth lobbying for.
well, what I was gonna
No.
propose is we get a little solar working group. Because there's a lot to explore in this. We also have had another proposal from Frida Logistics that has a lot of hydropower, but
Hmm.
and solar power, and
Mhm.
they're saying we could you could participate in that. So I think but to me, Glenn wound up our phone call with Kate and I saying, yeah, but maybe the best option is to partner with a developer yourself.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I think there's, we kind of tossed that out at Kate and I. Oh, that lands with us.
Then you've got the IRA, there's potentially funding there from the federal government
Mhm.
for the IRA.
So I was going to see who might want to put their hand up to work on that. Okay,
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in too. We're gonna form a little subcommittee.
right. Community solar working.
Hey, Clifton, I was thinking too, it might be a future meeting to have, thinking maybe a Clifton or something, get them on Zoom to be able to ask questions. I know we have questions around where everything stands with the net metering issue from a regulatory and a legislative standpoint, questions around what we were just talking about. I just, it might be helpful to get him in for a half-hour Zoom at one of our meetings, just to kind of get a good update on all the enabling regulatory and legislative things that are going on. Just a thought.
I think that's a good idea. I think if Betsy and Herb and Peter survey the landscape.
Yeah.
So we know what these various what Revision has to offer compared to what doing something ourselves with city land would look like. And then the missing piece of the equation is what would the coalition be able to do? And if they got
And our treasurer, who's been on board since, she's a revision person, Kim Quirk. She's a treasurer for CPCH, and she's been with revision some time.
Does that sound a sensible
Yeah.
way to go?
Yeah.
And you may want to look at the, talking about the IRA funds, the state plans were just filed March 1st. that are, and then the implementation plan is due April 1st, but this is to get the $4.5 billion that's going to be spread across the country. And I just looked at the buildings piece in the New Hampshire plan, but there may be there may be actions for solar or whatever. So if you were interested in trying to get some of that
Yeah,
funding, it's probably something to look at fairly quickly.
yeah, that's excellent.
Hmm.
Thank you, yeah.
So you guys, make some time. Betsy, sounds like you have great depth of knowledge. Maybe you can.
This like ET corporate tax equity side of it, but it is, yeah, it's been amazing to see what projects we can get developed in places that you wouldn't think are
Mhm.
random parts of Texas, for example. Yeah.
So you and Herb, set up time to get together.
Sure.
Three of
Yeah.
you together and
Get together.
terrific. And think you can read the community solar legislation.
Yeah.
And then start exploring what are the opportunities if we use Citybrook. And worked with a developer.
Yep.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Come back. Good stuff. Yeah. And don't think you have to get it all done in a month.
I think our next meeting is April 3rd. That wasn't one of the ones we were debating. So,
And we'll get you dates for all the meetings. We've got those, the room reserved now. The hardest thing about meetings in this building is observing. Federal Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grants. Tracy, I thought this was up your alley.
Yes.
And you were just starting to talk about it. I put a article in from NHPR on Exeter receiving $200,000 from the Federal Department of Energy to help install energy efficiency upgrades for low-income households. And I thought that would be good. We could help our folks in PHA and Osprey Landing and other places like that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. I was curious and I spent a little time looking today for like New Hampshire programs and what monies have been allocated. I don't see a whole lot, and I'm just wondering if anyone's doing a lot of work on energy efficiency and what's available. If not, I'm happy to make some calls and dive in and kind of just survey the landscape.
That'd be great. Yeah, I did look at you can look on the Department of Energy website. This is under a program called it's Energy Efficiency Block Grants.
Okay.
I'll get you the link.
That'd be great.
Anybody want to help Tracy with that?
I started working on something related last year with the legal staff in the city, trying to figure out how to set up a trust for low-income residents for when they make upgrades to energy equipment in their house or windows to get grant funding so that they can go with the most efficient system, say going with heat pump instead of replacing an oil furnace with another oil furnace. But that it was very preliminary work. We were trying to figure out how you would administer that kind of grant program. We have a system for administering, well, at least a little better system through the welfare office for distributing funds when it comes to CDBG grants. But I'd be happy to start thinking about this because this is like a very similar mechanism. How do you administer it once you get the grant on board? And how do you make sure it's administered well? I think a lot of the questions we had were around making sure contractors who do the work are reasonable and not taking advantage of customers. So you're not giving out funds that could be used elsewhere more effectively. And your residents aren't being taken advantage of. So I think that those are the real questions around
Would New Hampshire
distributing funds.
Saves be involved in this space at all, or is it, is this kind of independent of
No,
what goes through New Hampshire Saves?
no, it's separate.
Federal funds.
Separate, yeah.
I'll help Tracy. We,
Right?
when Arrow was around, the company I worked for, we administered the state Arrow money to the municipalities. So we did the old library, got a VRS system. There's a couple. Rye got like 4 awards.
Hmm.
Because they were ready.
Yeah, I know Maine's done a lot with heat pumps. And I
Yeah.
spoke with someone a couple of years ago on that, but I can.
So
Renew that.
Tracy, you were asking about energy efficiency things. Are you talking about in New Hampshire, in our state, or?
New Hampshire's
'Cause I think
weatherization.
Clean Energy New Hampshire is a good source
Okay.
to look at. They're pretty much on the forefront of those kind of things.
And I can help with that. I'm on there.
Oh, you are?
Oh.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah.
Perfect.
Oh, and they have a circuit rider.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's right.
Mhm.
So maybe
And then maybe we can bring in someone
Katrina.
from legal. So that whatever we're applying for, we know how we're going to actually administer it on the backside.
Okay, IRA funding for school energy efficiency. Did I read that correctly? I thought there was.
School buses for sure. There was one.
School buses, but I thought also for energy efficiency, some energy efficiency projects for schools.
Mhm.
So how I understand it, the states had to come up with these plans, and if it's not in this plan, it's not gonna get funding.
Mm.
So this is the plan they just wrote, and then in a month, they have to come up with their implementation plan. But there's a whole section on local government building and facility measures. So yeah, there will be
Hmm.
that included
I
in
thought I read
what
in
the
their
state's applying for.
examples of what could, like insulation, heat pumps, and
Mhm.
there was quite a bit. So,
Windows, yeah.
yeah, windows, and so I don't know, that might be something to work with our school department. Great.
Good, good. That's, thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Tom. Thank you, Counselor. And public comment, we have no. It's pleasantly quiet, crickets. So Stephanie, let's just put in our minutes that we have follow-ups for community solar and city developer partnership solar that we've initiated with Herb, Betsy, and Peter. And they'll update us the next meeting. And we are going to explore federal energy efficiency and conservation block grants. Tracy is going to work on that with Counselor Cook and with Tom Rooney. Get an update on that at the next, at April 3rd. Anything else for the good of the effort?
I have one thing. I had been thinking a lot about hydropower and opportunities that we have in Portsmouth around tidal power. And it's something that I don't necessarily think we should talk about it next month, but I think it's something that maybe we should start thinking about, is another opportunity.
There's
UNH
a,
been testing.
they have a
There was a
demonstration.
turbine in the
Yeah.
water, so
Yeah.
under the bridge.
Right.
Interesting to hear how that's.
Now, we have some infrastructure though that's city owned that has tidal waters that flow through it every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A turbine.
it's called the Living Bridge Project, the UNH
Yeah.
project. And there's some huge challenges with generating power in that river.
A lot.
It's a lot of,
A lot of force.
Yeah.
force, but a lot of following.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's really-
Imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking about like the tidal areas of South Mill Pond, the water that flows
Oh,
in
Mhm.
and out
Yeah.
every day,
Mhm.
North Mill Pond. I mean, this is all
Deeper.
city infrastructure,
Mhm.
not state infrastructure.
My house is right there. We can feed them.
Just like that.
hook up a wire right there.
Sunset South Mill Pond? Yeah, okay. We're
That's
neighbors.
that's an intrigue. I mean, what's old is new, right? That was built to
Mhm.
run a mill,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's intriguing.
As far as building efficiencies, though, there is there are direct grants to churches, houses of worship, nonprofits, all through the IRA Act. And they're up to like 200,000 per applicant. And so I'm involved with the Unitarian Church that's trying to get some of that grant. But you know, almost every community like ours has multiple churches or synagogue who qualify for these federal monies, and it doesn't go through the state of New Hampshire. So
Okay. Anything else? Thank you all. It's gonna be a good committee. Motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Second,
Aye.
all in favor?
Aye.
And